brought it up, and when I...
So that's your red, this is your red XRL and your blue one?
Right.
So, yeah, the blue one is channel one. Right, yeah, I just do audios only, I don't do the mix one that you're doing. So it's totally isolated. But in the way we set it up is I am doing the podium on both channels, so it's channel 2
It's not just audio, it's audio plus that, but I bring it down.
So, yeah, the 302 mixer is a good choice for you.
302?
Yeah.
It's right, I'll show it to you, it's right here.
Because I do need something that's fairly,
This is
Simple.
old school, it's very simple, and no recorder. There's 3 inputs and microline level, and and the cam pots are like these switches down here is left, right, and center. So that's all there is to it. That's the power, and there's a tone generator. It's very, very basic, but very good quality.
thank you, sure.
I always like looking at other people's records. Yeah. I mean, Zoom or one of those other companies do the same thing.
Well, thank you all for being here today, and I want to thank all of my colleagues who are true leaders in the area of gun violence prevention for being here. As I think it's been well said before, but gun violence is the leading cause of death for children and for teens, and we should all be embarrassed by that. We should all be outraged by that, and we should be doing everything we can to change that. We're here today because we're going to introduce a package of bills on background checks. Background checks save lives. We have a couple of examples of exactly how that's happened, how important that is. You'll hear about that. One in Boulder, Colorado, where background checks prevented a violent individual from getting a gun. He resorted to other types of mayhem. No one died. People were injured, but had that person been able to get his hands on guns, it would have been a lot worse. People most certainly would have died. We'll also hear about a Michigan example where someone had planned to shoot up a Jewish daycare center, but because of background checks, that person was stopped from getting a gun. Every day, 160 felons and 50 domestic abusers are stopped from buying firearms because of the background checks. It makes sense, and it makes our community safer to have strong background check laws in place. 90% of both gun owners and non-gun owners support expanding background checks, and that's in part why I introduced the Bipartisan Background Checks Act, and you'll hear from him from himself, but why Representative Clyburn introduced the Enhanced Background Checks Act. And it's important that we talk about these today, and in contrast with what's happening in the Trump administration. They are trying to take us back in time. We've made some good progress in the gun violence prevention space, the community violence intervention funding. The Trump administration is pulling back. They're trying to legalize machine guns, legalize silencers. They've closed the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention. All of these things help save lives, and that's what we are all here in support of. So I'd like to turn it over to Representative Jim Clyburn, who's been just a stalwart on this issue. Jim?
Thank you very much, Representative Thompson. Representative Thompson mentioned the effectiveness of background checks in the instances where they worked. Well, we've had background checks for a long, long time, but the question is, some of it just have not been effective. Next week, the 17th, we are going to commemorate the 10th anniversary of the murder of 9 worshipers in the basement of the Emmanuel AME Church in Charleston, South Carolina. These were all constituents of mine, some of whom I knew very personally. In the days before this event, a young man went into a gun shop and attempted to purchase a gun. Under our current laws, all he had to do was to wait 3 days, and if nothing turned up, he could get the gun. He waited the 3 days, and nothing turned up. He went back, and he got the gun. The problem is, the FBI has investigated, and if we had in our law an enhanced background check, we may have prevented the murder of 9 people. Now, why didn't they catch it? It's because all they had to do was wait 3 working days. And somebody, I don't know whether it was intentional or not, the addresses did not line up. He purchased a gun in West Columbia, and according to my understanding, his address was in Columbia, 2 different cities. They caught it. But when they caught it, 5 days had expired, and he was able to take advantage of the 3 days. My bill will close that loophole. This enhanced background checks act would eliminate the 3-day period and establish in its place a process that would take 10 days for one to wait. And if at the end of the 10 days you could, and it's still not complete, you could go back. And another 10-day period will take place before you can purchase the gun. Now, I just have to say this. When you're this close to an issue, when you have friends, when you've grown up in a parsonage as I grew up, and you go to Bible study as many times as I've gone to Bible study, and you know that those 9 souls were doing, were involved in the process that brings out the best in all of us. And to invite someone into their midst, this young man was no stranger to this Bible study. He had cased the church, he had researched the church, and he picked this church because of its history. He wanted to start, in his words, a race war. And he went to the most historic African-American church in Charleston, South Carolina, Emmanuel AME Church, to carry out his mission. He sat there with them as they studied Scripture. And when they bowed their heads to say a closing prayer, he pulled out this gun that he had gotten and murdered them. A background check of the kind we are talking about here today would have prevented that, because he never would have gotten the gun, because in the 5th day they found what the error was. And so I think it is fitting and proper for us to visit these 2 pieces of legislation, pass them into law. It will not keep any law-abiding citizens from getting a gun. Over 92% of all background checks are completed within the 3-day period. This would only affect 8% of the people who attempted to purchase a gun. And to me, that is not an undue burden on the American citizens, especially those who are law-abiding. And I would like now to yield to the leader of the House Democratic Caucus, Hakeem Jeffries.
I thank Jim Clyburn, the distinguished gentleman from South Carolina, for yielding and for his leadership. I certainly thank Chairman Mike Thompson and the entire Gun Violence Prevention Task Force for their continuing and steadfast efforts to combat the scourge of gun violence here in the United States of America. As House Democrats, we stand strongly behind the bipartisan background checks legislation and the enhanced background checks legislation that is being introduced here today. These are common sense, life-saving measures designed to improve public safety for everyday Americans all across the country. The gun violence epidemic that has ravaged America for far too long in such horrific ways, in such deeply personal ways, in such searing ways, requires an aggressive, common sense response. And House Democrats are prepared to do just that. We just need a handful of Republicans to join us to advance and enhance the safety of the American people. Gun violence is the leading cause of death for children and teenagers in the United States of America. That should shock the conscience of everyone. That is completely unacceptable and unconscionable. And there are things that can be done to turn that situation around. And we should start the bipartisan background checks bill and the enhanced background checks bill. So I'm thankful for the leadership of Mike Thompson, the leadership of Jim Clyburn, and the leadership of the Gun Violence Prevention Task Force. We will continue to press forward with the fierce urgency of now until we crush the gun violence epidemic in the United States of America. It's now my high honor and privilege to yield to a fierce champion on behalf of the gun violence prevention and gun safety effort in the United States of America, the Honorable Lucy McBath.
Well, thank you so much, Leader Jeffries. And I want to give, high praise to Representative Mike Thompson and Representative Clyburn for their most critical and important work in these two pieces of legislation. When I first came to Washington, those two pieces of legislation I knew about, and I knew when I came to Washington that I would do whatever I could to help uplift and to strengthen the ability to get them across the aisle to save as many lives as I could. Thank you, Leader Jeffries, Congressman Clyburn, Assistant Leader Neguse, Congresswoman Dingo, and Congresswoman Peterson for being here. And Chairman Mike Thompson, he has been our fearless leader. He really has been on the forefront every single day, continuing to encourage each of us that are gun sense champions here in Washington to not relent, not bend the knee, and continue to do everything that we can in our power to make sure that we're saving lives. Many of you know that I came to Congress to work on behalf of my son Jordan and continue his legacy so that no other parents across the country would ever have to face the devastation that I have lived and have faced, which is the pain of losing a loved one unnecessarily to gun violence. The pieces of legislation I and my colleagues here today are leading are all pieces of comprehensive gun safety legislation that it prevents violence. And these are strategies. These two pieces of legislation are strategies with one goal in mind, and that is simply to save lives. Every day, a victim of domestic violence searches for a way to survive. They face physical assaults from fists, household objects, or anything that can be used to harm them. For those whose abusers have been convicted, there has at least been one critical layer of protection for them: the knowledge that their abuser will not have the ability to be able to purchase a firearm. That protection exists because of a life-saving federal law that has been in place for 57 years, one that lawmakers for decades have defended in a shared understanding that domestic abusers and guns are a deadly combination. But today, that protection is under threat. A rule proposed by the Trump administration will open a door for known domestic abusers to get firearms without limited checks or without accountability. My colleagues and I in the Democratic Women's Caucus and the Gun Violence Prevention Task Force sent a letter to the Department of Justice imploring them to listen to survivors who are begging that these protections not be overturned. Imagine a world in which more abusers have access to firearms. It affects every single one of us. It affects people in your communities and your neighborhoods. It affects women behind closed doors in the silence of their abuse. Sometimes the signs are hidden and convictions are rare, and escape is very complicated for these women. You may know someone who is facing domestic violence, your child's teacher, or maybe your best friend, or your neighbor. It's not enough to hope that they leave the relationship, because oftentimes it's almost impossible for them to leave the relationship. It is not enough to win a conviction, And the Trump administration wants to give gun rights back to these proven abusers. We cannot let dangerous people have access to even more dangerous weapons when they have proven to be a threat to the safety and also even to our law enforcement. Unfortunately, all of these disputes, local officers are called to these addresses. Domestic violence incidents involving a gun are some of the most dangerous, and they say that over and over and over again. Those are some of the most volatile situations that they are called to. The emotion and the volatility during these incidents mean that they can quickly turn deadly. And if a lethal weapon is present, that's even more so. Instead of strengthening background checks and red flag laws to provide tools to our law enforcement, the Trump administration has weakened those crisis response tools that law enforcement needs to be able to use, and they depend on them. And they're drastically cutting funding to police departments, putting our officers at risk as well. I've been the lead sponsor of a bill that provides funding for programs focused on protecting law enforcement and survivors and preventing family violence, including for the National Domestic Violence Hotline. So I thank every one of my colleagues that are standing here today and those that don't have the ability to stand here but are still fighting on the front lines. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for leading these important pieces of legislation. We are the Gun Sense Democratic Caucus. We are the new gun lobby, and we will help keep the American people safe because our Republican colleagues refuse to do that very thing. Thank you. And at this time, it is my esteemed privilege to call up Representative Debbie Dingell of Michigan.
Thank you, Lucy, and thank you to the chair of the Gun Violence Task Force and to my dear friend Jim Clyburn and to everybody who's working on this issue. Gun violence has devastated too many families in every corner of our country. Every day we're faced with questions: when will the next shooting be? Who will be the next target? How many families will experience the indescribable pain of losing a child, a parent, a brother, or a sister? And thoughts and prayers aren't going to prevent the next tragedy. The bills we're talking about today, universal background checks, in addition to safe storage laws and extreme risk protection orders, are all common sense laws that literally save lives. We've seen them work in my home state of Michigan. In December of 2022, a Michigan man was arrested and charged with illegally possessing a firearm after going on an anti-Semitic rant and threatening parents and children outside a synagogue preschool in Bloomfield Hills. After berating the families, this man attempted to buy multiple firearms that same day. His purchase was denied after a background check that revealed he had been convicted of a felony. He lied about his eligibility. That background check was the only thing that stopped him from purchasing 3 guns, and who knows how many children he might have killed. I'm grateful we have laws in place in my state that prevented a horrible tragedy, but we have to do more. And I'll speak very briefly. I'm the child that lived in a home with a man that shouldn't have had guns. I had to stop my father. I got in the middle of my father trying to kill my mother. And I was 7th grade. My sister was 4. I know what it's like to hide in a closet and pray to God, please God, let me survive this night, and hope my father wouldn't have access to those guns. A gun in a domestic violence situation, and it's very hard for me to talk about it, but I do for one reason. It happens in all kinds of places and to all kinds of people. And we have to remove the stigma of people being willing to admit what happens. And people who've been convicted of domestic violence shouldn't have access to guns. I have spent my life trying to make sure no child ever has to live through what we lived through. We know the vast majority of Americans, 90% of them, support background checks. They don't infringe on anyone's rights. There's no good reason why Congress can't get this done. We can't quit fighting. We have to change the laws. We have to save people's lives. And now, a mother who, this child is what we want, we're doing this for. So he never has to face. Please welcome Representative Brittany Peterson, who never stops fighting.
Thank you, Debbie. Oh, hi, everybody.
You got
Sure.
2 men willing to take it. Oh, he's sleeping.
He loves it. As long as his arms are big. I love that. I can't wait to tell him one day that Representative Clyburn was holding him at a press conference. But my name is Brittany Peterson. I represent Colorado's 7th Congressional District, and I stand alongside these leaders as a mom. My son Davis is here too, and Sam, and he's waving, and the kids across Colorado, making sure, in the country, making sure that we do our part to bring these common sense pieces of legislation that will keep guns out of the hands of criminals, the people who we know are a danger, who are convicted and should never have access to guns. Unfortunately, Colorado has experienced the consequences of gun violence. When I was in 11th grade, I was at the neighboring school in Littleton, and that was when the Columbine massacre occurred. We thought that then it shocked the world, it shocked our community, and now things like that are normal on television. That is not something on the news. It's not something that we should ever accept. We've also seen mass shootings in grocery stores, in places of worship, in a movie theater. Colorado recently, with the violent attacks that targeted the people who were running to bring back the hostages from Hamas, in targeting that community, the Jewish community, he went to go buy a weapon, and it was because of background checks that he was denied. And while it is a tragic situation, what that attack would have been a massacre if it wasn't for background checks. And so I'm proud to stand alongside the people who are actually trying to change things here in Washington. I think across the United States, people are furious that we can't come together on something like background checks. Even overwhelmingly, Republicans support this. In Colorado, we believe that you should be able to have a gun as long as you're a law-abiding citizen, and that we should have mechanisms in place to protect people in our community. And we've been able to pass legislation at the state level, and I'm proud to have been a part of that in the legislature, but across the United States, unfortunately, far too many people have been left behind with failed leadership. We need national standards. This is absolutely common sense that a weapon that is designed to kill many people within seconds, that you would have to go through a background check. That makes sense, right? So I just want to thank people standing behind me for leading on this for years, continuing this fight, and I hope that the Republicans will join us. Thank you.
Well, thank you all. Anyone have any questions? Thank you. Still got it, Jim.
How's that for you, my friend? Good? Cool. Good. Good. The what now? That's the last one for today. Yeah. Yeah. I think so, at least. I hope.